Hello, my name is Stephanie Finn, and I'm a literacy coach at the West Genesee School District. I am also the Vice Chair of the Reading League Board, and I'm here to share information with you today about how to lead dynamic data meetings. Here are some of the key points of our discussion today. Data-driven decision-making is a key component of a multi-tiered system of supports school-wide prevention model. Data-driven decision-making begins with high-quality, purposeful data meetings. Today, I will focus on facilitating a dynamic data meeting to empower educators to use assessment data to drive their instruction. Reviewing the data collaboratively ensures accountability for evaluating and modifying your instructional practices to effectively meet the needs of all students. Before I begin today, take a moment and reflect on the following prompt. My greatest hope for data decision making today is my biggest concern when it comes to data decision making, and a belief that you hold about working collaboratively with data. You may choose to pause the video at this time to jot down your thoughts. The two resources that I use as reference for establishing successful professional learning communities and facilitating effective data meetings are Learning by Doing, a handbook for professional learning communities at work by Rick and Rebecca DeFore, and Got Data, Now What? Creating and Leading a Cultures of Inquiry by Laura Lipton and Bruce Wellman. The first book, Learning by Doing, helps educators close the knowing-doing gap as they transform their schools into professional learning communities, or PLCs. It is a useful guide for action that helps educators develop a common vocabulary and consistent understanding of key PLC concepts. These key PLC concepts benefit students and educators alike. The second book, Got Data, Now What? Explores the challenges that schools teams face when gathering, interpreting, and utilizing school data. It offers methods for efficient data collection, group work structures, strategies, and tools to turn data decisions into goal-oriented, productive action plans. I recommend both of these resources to guide your work in creating dynamic data meetings. A professional learning community, or PLC, is a group of educators that meet regularly, share expertise, and work collaboratively to improve teaching skills and academic performance of their students. PLCs are focused on three major components: learning, collaboration, and results. In a PLC, learning, not teaching, is the fundamental goal and focus. To focus on the goal of learning, there are 4 essential questions that guide the work of a team, and these questions can be used to guide your data discussions. The first question is, what do we expect our students to learn? This is a question that's focused on the goals and expectations. In order to answer this question, we need to be able to determine priority or essential standards. What is the need to know for those students? Develop student-friendly learning targets. Create learning progressions, including any prerequisite skills needed to reach each of the priority standards. The second question, how will we know if they're learning? This is our assessments, our formative, ongoing assessments. In order to address this question, we need to be able to develop common formative assessments aligned to priority standards, monitor and diagnose student learning needs, determine scoring and administration of the assessments, and that needs to be agreed upon to ensure reliability. Then we need to take a step where we analyze the assessment data to determine student strengths and the specific types of errors that are in the students' data. What are their strengths and what are their skill deficits? And this happens during your data meeting. The third question of a PLC, how will we respond when they don't learn? The focus of a data meeting is to analyze the data with the goal to affect instruction. So how will we respond when they don't learn? This is the intervention in reteaching. In order to address this question, we need to be able to group the students with similar errors and similar misconceptions to intervene or reteach. Some students might need more practice on a skill. We need to share students and share the work to plan and implement intervention groups. Develop a check-in for students in order for them to demonstrate their new learning. So we want to have those assessments, those ongoing assessments to check if students have mastered the skills. The final question that we tackle is how will we respond if the students already know it? This is our enrichment or our extension time for the students. In order to address this question, we need to be able to group the students to extend their learning of the priority standards. It's not just about acceleration. We're not going to the next level, the next grade level standards. There are ways to enrich and extend the students' thinking deeper in the standard. Develop a quick check-in for students to demonstrate their new learning. Student data is the driving force behind the answers to these questions. Therefore, the data meetings are an integral part of a PLC. It is important for a collaborative team to invest in the idea of collective responsibility. Collective responsibility is that all members of the school, including but not limited to administrators, teachers, counselors, support staff, are accepting responsibilities for the student's success. We are all in this together and we support each other. That's the basis of collective responsibility. There are commitments for collective responsibility. We have a shared goal to ensure that high levels of learning for every student occurs. To achieve this goal, several beliefs are necessary. We have to truly believe that all means all. When we say all students can learn the essentials, we have to mean it. We need to believe and have a focus on learning rather than teaching. We truly have to believe and make a promise that it is our responsibility to ensure that all students learn the material. This helps the team to work together and focus on the right work. And with collective responsibility and everyone working together, we will make an impact on student learning. When we are committed to these ideas, we have taken a significant step towards a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And also, we're meeting the needs of all students under a multi-tiered system of support. We share a collective responsibility. No longer are they my students or your students, or my data or your data. We start using the pronouns we and our. These are our students we're working with in a grade level team. This is our data that we are looking at. It is a collective commitment that we ensure proper foundations are in place for data meetings so that they can be a time of support, growth, collaboration, and productivity with the goal of success for all students in mind. So collective responsibility is really a cornerstone of the data meetings. Before I discuss the structure to support successful data meetings, I would like to share some common dilemmas and barriers to effective data meetings that you may have faced in the past. The first one is insufficient time. Failure to make time for assessments, data meetings, and follow-up is a common barrier. Failure to make time for collaboration is also a common mistake. Schools and districts that successfully promote data-informed decision-making often have one key feature in common. They dedicate collaborative time for teachers. Teacher team meetings are key to effective data analysis. Without the commitment to those data meetings and the time for collaboration, the data use is impossible. Another barrier is infrequent assessments or delayed results. Assessments only given once every 3 to 4 months are not frequent enough to provide data analysis to drive instruction. You may have an old assessment and it's too late to make instructional adjustments. The data should be analyzed frequently and after each time you give the assessment. Sometimes there's a curriculum assessment disconnect. If the curriculum does not match, if your instruction does not match the assessment, that can be a barrier. Or sometimes the data doesn't align to what you're doing with instruction. As I said, you analyze the data so that you can actually drive your instruction and make changes in your instruction. Sometimes school districts separate the teaching and the analysis. So teachers hand over their data and their data analysis to a data team, and they don't analyze the results themselves. This prevents them from taking ownership over the process. Also, another barrier is ineffective follow-up. Vague commitments to make adjustments to instruction after you analyze the results, or no specific plan for improvement. There should be a clear connection between analysis of the data, what does the data show us, and instruction. So now let's review the structure of the data meeting. You might use the term data protocols for your structure. Protocols are tools. Tools make the job at hand easier to do. Protocols help teachers keep their decisions focused, their time used efficiently, and their actions purposeful and impactful. Establishing a meeting structure to analyze the data helps the teams focus on the data-based facts and will ensure that your data meetings will run smoothly. I will review the steps that you can take before and during a data meeting to maximize the effectiveness of the limited time that we know you have. So let's look at before the data meeting. Before the data meeting, make sure that you select the data. Selecting pieces of data to be examined and discussed before the meeting occurs is important. 1 or 2 pieces will be sufficient. Don't focus on too much data at one time. It will make the meeting less effective. Establishing a clear way to share the data so that you don't spend the data meeting time trying to figure out how to look at the data and sort it is something that you can do before the data meeting to make it run much more smoothly. Another piece is an agenda. Agenda should be distributed in advance to all the members of the team. Team members should know the clear expectations of the meeting before you have it. Having clear objectives and keeping it simple. Agendas with too many objectives or that are not realistic sets the team up for failure. Once you have an established agenda, make sure you stick to it. If you stick to the agenda set forth, everyone has a clear expectation of how that data meeting is going to be run. There also should be some consistency from data meeting to data meetings. Once you set up your protocols and how you're going to run a data meeting, you should continue on with that protocol for each time you're going to analyze data. Establish a common and consistent recording tool. This will help the team get to the point where they're really talking about what to do next with instruction versus trying to figure out how to sort and stack and look at the data. Also, a recording tool to brainstorm ideas and ways to support students is a great thing to set up prior to your data meetings. Prior to the data meetings, one thing that should be set up is tasks and roles. Appointing specific roles to members of the team. And we'll get to that in a little bit when I talk about different roles of team members during a meeting. So these are the things that you should put in place before a data meeting to help it run successfully. Here is a sample data discussion recording tool that can be used at your data meetings. This one is broken down into the goal, the targets, the assessment data that will be reviewed. Maybe put a link to the chart where the data is located in this section of the recording tool. And then the discussion structure. Under each category is a reference to those 4 guiding questions. What do we want every student to know? How will we know if they've learned it? What will we do if they have not learned it? And what will we do if they already know it? So this is just a way to kind of organize your conversation, your thoughts, your ideas, and the data during a data meeting. It's also a great way to go back and reference. So if you have a shared drive or a shared folder that you're using with your data team, you can always go back and reference charts like this to help you drive your next data meeting. So now let's discuss what are some things that you can do during a data meeting. These are the steps you can take during a data meeting to ensure that it will run smoothly. First is the introduction. Review the agenda and establish a purpose for the meeting. Articulate clearly the desired outcome. Review your norms and your engagement for the team members, which is their roles or their jobs. I'll discuss norms in just a little bit. The agenda, like I said, we should keep it simple and there should be a clear focus. Sometimes what happens with data meetings, and this is a barrier that I reviewed, we try to do too much in too little time, and it's not the most effective. Less is more sometimes with this. The second step during a data meeting is making predictions about the data and explore assumptions. This takes time of looking at the data, sorting it, analyzing it, comparing it, contrasting it, looking at previous data, looking at other diagnostic data that might support, and having a data discussion with the whole team. Acting on the data is the next step. We want to brainstorm an action plan. We want to dive a little deeper into our data discussion. And then finally, during a data meeting, we have coming to consensus. We want to focus on the actions and create a plan for implementation. So these are the 4 steps of a data meeting to help ensure that it runs smoothly. The data discussion protocol that I talked about in step 3, this one is called Here's What, Now What, So What. And it's a simple protocol for increasing complex thinking about a topic, perspective, or data point. Groups can take the simple ideas and elaborate, extend, and explore the data. This protocol can guide the productive work of the team. Each portion should be limited to about 10 minutes. So let's look deeper at this data discussion protocol of here's what, so what, now what. First, let's go to the here's what. These are the specific factual statements about the data. One thing that we do not want to do at this time are use words like because, therefore, it seems, or however. We're not giving reasons for the data, we are just stating facts about the data. This is what I see, this is what I notice. What stands out to you? Keep the statements factual and encourage the data team members to avoid using these words. The next portion of the data discussion is what I call so what. This portion of the protocol is where team members do make interpretations of the data. We start looking at conclusions. Why do you think this happened? When we start looking at this so what portion of the data discussion, we're talking a little bit about instruction and review, things that occurred prior to this assessment. We have interpretations now, and we're giving our perspectives, keeping it focused on the data and not all the outside events that can occur. Finally, we have the now what, and this is the most important component of the data discussion protocol. This portion of the protocol is where the team members take a plan of action, including relevant questions, discuss what are the implications of the data, and figure out, so what are we going to do? Successful data teams take a solution-oriented approach. How will this drive our instruction, and how will we change our instruction to ensure that the students are getting what they need? We will connect the data analysis to the instructional strategies at this step. It would be helpful to create an organizational structure like this chart below to analyze the data with the here's what, now what, so what data discussion protocol. So many times with data meetings, we find that we take a lot of time on the here's what and figuring out what the data looks like, and the so what, trying to figure out the implications of why the data looks the way it does, that we don't leave sufficient time for the now what. And that is really the most important piece because, as I said, that data analysis is all about connecting to your instruction and driving and changing so that all the students are learning. Data meetings are most effective when team members serve specific roles for planning and conducting the meeting, including leading a protocol, being the meeting facilitator, note taker, timekeeper, and by identifying the key roles and clarifying everyone's responsibilities and strategically including all members of the team in data meetings, it can maximize the participation and align the meeting efforts with desired outcomes. Everyone feels that they have a stake in the meeting. One suggestion is to assign the specific roles prior to the data meeting and then rotate the roles to ensure that every member has an opportunity to participate. Here are some examples of the team roles and responsibilities. A facilitator. This should not always be the administrator. This should be rotated around among the team members. It gives them an opportunity to lead the data meeting, and it gives them an opportunity to take ownership of the data and that meeting. So a facilitator clarifies the roles for the group. They keep the group on task and directs the process. A facilitator encourages everyone to participate, contributes their own ideas, plans out the agenda, gets it distributed to the team before the meeting, and clarifies any meeting follow-up or next steps. Another key role in a data meeting is the recorder. It's very difficult for someone who's going to lead the meeting as a facilitator to also be the person responsible for taking the notes of the meeting. So the recorder supports the facilitator, contributes to the data, because all members of the data team will contribute to the data, charts ideas and information, and distributes the notes to all the team members after. So if there's any follow-up or if there's anything that the team members need, the recorder is responsible for that. You might find in a data meeting that you have 2 or 3 recorders because there needs to be more people taking notes and really helping the data meeting to be as effective as possible. And finally, the timekeeper. The timekeeper, it's exactly what it sounds like. They monitor, they set up the time, and they make sure that everybody stays on task and keeps the group going within the time limits. Like I said before, sometimes a lot of time is wasted in those 2 other key components of a data discussion, and we never get to that end, which is the connection to instruction. And that's the most important piece. Next, we have norms. Meeting norms are the standards that you set for working together positively and productively as a group. They should provide a guideline for behavior at the data meetings. They speak to the importance of leadership in setting the right tone and expectations for the data use among the teachers. Leaders must create a culture of inquiry that allows for authentic teacher engagement in all stages of the data use process. Norms can develop a shared sense of responsibility and buy-in. They may address conflicts or interpersonal issues. They ensure that you're not making assumptions based on your own set of ideas. Norms should be established by the team and reviewed at the beginning of each meeting. It sets the culture of your data meetings. And if everyone at the team has a firm belief in collective responsibility, it makes it more of a collaborative effort. So here are some examples of meeting norms. Monitor own adherence to meeting standards. Contribute own ideas. Seek other ideas and clarify and understand. Listen to others. Wait your turn to speak. Some of this can be assumed that it's just proper etiquette, but it is good to be reviewed every time you have a data meeting. Looks for patterns and trends that are emerging in the data. Contributes positively to the meeting goals and outcomes, and contributes to the data and planning and agenda preparation for the next meeting. So one thing that the norms can also do is ensure, just like the roles and responsibilities, that everyone has stake in this data meeting. I think it's also a great idea, just like you will change roles and responsibilities in a data meeting and other people will facilitate at times. It's good to share the norms as well. So a different person shares the norms each time so they really truly understand them. Sometimes it's helpful for a facilitator of the meeting to have some scripted dialogue to help facilitate the meeting to ensure that all the components are addressed. If you've been in a data meeting, that you know that sometimes it's fast and furious and then all of a sudden you forget to review a component or you forgot something on the agenda. So here are some sample facilitator sentence starters. When the facilitator begins to use this dialogue or these sentence starters, it can feel a little clunky, but the more you practice and the more you use the same wording each time, the easier it will become. I keep these sentence stems on an index card that I reference often when I facilitate data meetings. Here are some samples sentence stems for facilitating the data meeting and the particular focus for each one. Today we are going to be viewing. You want to clearly outline the specific data and what you're going to be reviewing. As a result of our dialogue, this is the specific outcome of the meeting. We will give the specific time limits. We will be focusing on, identify the specific learning target focus. Sometimes while the teachers or the data team is analyzing the data, you might use some sentence stems such as, please describe what you're seeing in the data. This ensures that the data is being analyzed, each member is on task and shares. You might use a sentence stem such as, what stands out to you? What are some of the patterns or trends that you see? Sometimes you need to push the team a little bit further for other diagnostic data that can help support what they're looking at. Maybe we need to explore additional data sources. And as I said, very important component, what are the action plans? We need to examine in the instruction, the intervention, or the extension that's going to happen for our students based on the 4 PLC questions that we're answering during this data meeting. And then finally, setting short-term and long-term goals ensures that you have a focus when you leave the meeting. You have to measure the effectiveness of the plan you put in place. So now that I've reviewed the protocols of a data meeting and the structures to help it run successfully, here are some tips to ensure that your data meetings are successful. Provide time for the teams to orient themselves to the data before you start talking about it. An opportunity for each group member to prepare and explore the data. Sometimes that needs to happen before the data meeting to make sure the data meeting is as effective and time efficient. Develop a sequence for exploration and designate a starting point. Again, this goes back to limit the amount of data that your team is looking at to ensure that they can dive deep into it. And picking data that really is going to drive the instruction. Applying structures and protocols to balance the participation really does help to ensure that there's engagement, focus, and time efficiency in a data meeting. You could do this by assigning the roles and establishing those group norms that are reviewed every data meeting. Sometimes it might seem campy to go over the norms, but it really does help to establish a focus and help to understand the culture of the data meeting. It's also beneficial for teams to create their own norms so they have ownership of them. Establishing a recording protocol, creating common charts and displays for teachers to enter the data. If it's a shared spreadsheet, then all the teachers can enter their data and they can review the data prior to coming to the data meeting so they have an understanding of it. The data meeting should not be the first time that that team is putting their eyes on the data. Here are more tips for a successful data meeting. Let the teachers do the talking. Teachers must own the assessments and the data analysis. This helps when you have fully established a culture of collective responsibility because people aren't feeling that they're being personally attacked by the data, but it's our data and our students. Rather than telling the teachers what to do, point at the data and ask them what they think it means. This is a key component of the person that is facilitating the data meeting. And again, I reiterate, it should not always be the administrator that's leading a data meeting. That role should be rotated around so that teachers have ownership. Go back to specific test questions if necessary. If you have an assessment and students did poorly on one question, go back and look at the question. Think about how that question was worded. Think about if there was any vocabulary in that question that may have stumped the students. Know the data yourself. As you're facilitating a data meeting, it's important to be able to know the data. If you are a school leader, that you can ensure that the meeting is going to be as productive as possible. And finally, make sure the analysis is connected to a concrete action plan. I continue to say that we analyze the data. We assess the students so that we can analyze their data so we can figure out what it is that they know and they don't know so that it can drive our instruction. Insights are meaningless unless written down as part of a plan. Saying that you're going to do something without follow-through is really difficult. To make sure that your data meetings are successful and that your interventions and instruction are going to be as targeted as possible to the needs of the students. Structured time for collaboration about classroom instruction is essential as well. So as I said, sometimes those data meetings, we get to the very end and the most important piece of the discussion is the instruction and the connection and the intervention or the extension, and we run out of time. Ensure that you make time for that part of the conversation. That's why expediting some of the data analysis prior to the meeting will be helpful to make your meetings run smoothly. Have a continuous cycle of dialogue focused on the evidence base for improvement. Really focus and hone in on the data, not all the other events that may be contributing to it, but really focusing in on the here's what. What is the data showing us? What do we do about that data? Please take a moment to reflect on your learning from this video. What are some things that you might start doing in a data meeting? What are some things that you may stop doing that you have been doing in a data meeting? What are some barriers that you now know that you can overcome based on some of the information that was shared with you today? There may be some things that you say, I'm on the right track, let's continue doing it. Or there may be some things that you're going to begin to do to help facilitate your data meetings. You may choose to establish norms for a meeting, or use the dialogue sentence starters to help facilitate the data meeting. Whatever you're choosing to stop doing, continue doing, or start doing, I hope that this slideshow helped you to begin to think about how you can foster a dynamic data meeting in your district and create a culture of inquiry that allows for authentic teacher engagement in all stages of the data process. Thank you.